Hey, one thought I have is the Western tradition and the love of classical music, of classical text, is it in as much danger as you think? One thing I've noticed is though people claim, though the people you're thinking of will claim, I won't listen to classical music because it's white music. Actually, every single major Hollywood movie that needs to reach for music that actually moves an audience in a tense moment is reaching for classical music. They're replicating basically the romantic style of orchestration in Hollywood scores. And so we actually get that all the time, whether we realize it or not. And the persistence of that style in movie scoring is a testament to how powerfully audiences are still moved by that kind of music. I think of the movie that's coming out later this summer, Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, um, very likely to attract massive crowds all over America and Europe and indeed the world. And hopefully it's a very good film. I'm very much looking forward to it. But at some level, people revealed preferences, right? People talk is cheap. Behavior means a lot more. Are these traditions actually under as much threat as you suppose they are?
Well, I don't want to echo the kind of right-wing threat machine. I agree with you, and it's a very good observation about Hollywood movies. I hadn't thought about it that way. I was thinking in terms of the audience for classical music, which is, always declining. But there's something about the humanities that they always claim to be under threat. I wrote an article one time about the history of humanities, claiming that they were about to die out. And it starts at the beginning of the humanities in the 14th century and continues. They're always talking about how they're going to die out. Petrarch, the founder of the Studia Humanitatis, the humanities, he says it's all under threat. And one of the great philologists living in the absolute apogee of knowledge of Latin says, my generation is the last generation that's going to know Latin. This is 16th century. So, yeah, there's a tendency to exaggerate. And I don't believe that I think revealed preferences are very important. As far as classical music is concerned, I'm not so worried about that. I am worried about who teaches Western Civ. If you don't have people trained to teach it who are historians and literary people and who have some kind of understanding, the space gets filled up. And I'm less worried about the bad actors who go around saying that the West is contaminated by racism and sexism and colonialism and all that stuff, because those people often know very little and they can be refuted by the facts. I'm more worried about video games, actually. In America, the most important source of information about Western Civ is a video game that's known as Civ. And it is enormous. It's a huge footprint. There a huge number of gamers watch this. So last year, I found out about this from a former student of mine, teaches at the University of Chicago, named Ada Palmer, who follows this stuff. And she told me that last year there was discussion of historical periodization, right? And on Civ, it involved over 800,000 people who were talking about the periodization of history, but they were talking about it in terms that they derived from this very, I would say, biased presentation of Western history. So this is a deeply progressive, I don't mean in the political sense, it's a deeply modernizing game that you score points by overcoming the past, right? So, and you're heading towards the singularity. So at the beginning, you overcome the past by leaving behind feudalism and religious superstition. And, it's the old story of the rise of the West. It goes back to the 1950s. And gradually, as you approach the modern world, you get accelerationism, right? That the historical periods are happening more and more frequently.
Can I stop you for a second? So when you're
sure.
playing this game, you are a single protagonist? Are you a single character, or are you somehow playing the whole civilization?
Well, I haven't played it myself, but you're playing against other characters who are trying to move towards the modern world, right? So the whole presumption is that there's nothing of permanent value in the past. It's just that there's the modern world and there's the obstacles to modernity. And apparently, I have the figures somewhere. My student gave me her research, but there are millions of people who are playing this game online. Many more who are taking Western Civ classes. So I'm worried about a certain bias. We had a bias in teaching Western civilization for a long time. I once studied the previous works, Western Civ textbooks, which I very triumphalist, Triumph of the West, and the West and the rest. The West is better than the West. I don't buy any of that stuff myself. But these books were basically inspired by the Enlightenment, right? That they regarded everything before the Enlightenment as possibly valuable, but what they admired in the past most of all was the Enlightenment. And I admire many things in the Enlightenment myself, but what they tend to admire was the most radical parts of the Enlightenment. Most people who are Enlightenment philosophers were not atheists, right? It's a small minority. Most of them were people trying to reform Christianity in one way or another. So it's a false Enlightenment, but also there's a kind of built-in modernizing tendency, not to video games, to Western Civ books. I read recently an article by a high executive in MasterCard who was talking about how you do things in industry to get attention. And you always have to couch it in this language of disruptive innovation. So if you want to fix the toilet, you've got to tell people that you're going to open up a new age in toilet technology, which will disrupt all previous technologies. I'm satirizing this, right? But we have this bias in our civilization towards modernization, especially in America. America, more than any other country, I think, is devoted to innovation, to progress. And one reason I think that we should be studying Western civilization, and that will ultimately help us to civilize ourselves, is to be aware of the things that we shouldn't be leaving behind. The traditions of tolerance, for example, and liberalism in a certain sense. I guess I call myself an ordo-liberal these days, but I'm a liberal.
What liberal?
Have you heard this term, ordo-liberalism? Is that
when you're liberal, but you speak Urdu as well?
No, it's a kind of cult position it's people who are trying to create a middle ground between post-liberalism and classical liberalism. But they want to, instead of making GDP the ultimate goal of the liberal right, they want to make a good society the ultimate goal, and then build free institutions and free economies around an ideal of good society. But anyway, maybe we shouldn't pursue that particular rabbit. I think I've unleashed about 50 rabbits so far in this conversation.